On an August evening in 2021, under the dimming sky on the outskirts of Burgas, Bulgaria, two police officers picked their way through overgrown scrubland near a deserted warehouse. A foul chemical odour hung in the air. They were following up on a missing persons case, a 28-year-old local man who had vanished days earlier. What they found was the stuff of nightmares, several heavy plastic bags, partially buried, each oozing a noxious liquid. Inside were human remains, dismembered body parts, beginning to decompose. Investigators soon identified the victim as Yuma Mehmed, the very man they were looking for. Yuma had been shot once in the head, his corpse meticulously cut into pieces with an electric saw. Within weeks, detectives would uncover yet another missing person from nearly a year before, a woman named Teodora Bahlova, whose fate had haunted her family and the city. The two cases, it turned out, were intimately connected. Teodora Bahlova's story began before Yuma's, and for a long time it was a painful mystery with no answers. Teodora was a 46-year-old real estate broker, a well-known businesswoman, with a warm smile and a confident demeanour. She had spent years in London running a property business, but around late 2019, she decided to return to her hometown of Burgas. Teodora was enterprising and successful. In the recent past, she had even been considered one of the wealthier women in the region. Burgas, a bustling port city on the Black Sea coast, can be a place of contrasts. Sunny tourist beaches and malls alongside shadows of organised crime from the turbulent 1990s. Teodora knew the city's opportunities and its risks. Still, she felt comfortable here. She had family nearby, including her adult daughter Christiana and her elderly mother Stoyanka, and many friends from her youth. One of those friends was a man named Stanimir Radevsky. Stanimir, often called by the surname Ragevsky in Bulgarian press, was a 55-year-old construction entrepreneur in Burgas. He and Teodora went way back, described as old friend and business partner. Teodora trusted him. In fact, not long after moving back, she entered into a property development deal with Stanimir and another partner, investing her money into projects around town and even in a seaside resort village called Lozhenets. On October 29, 2020, Teodora Bahlova went out to meet someone and never came home. That day, she had told a close friend that she expected something very important was about to happen in her life. She seemed optimistic. Her daughter, Christiana, remembers that her mother wasn't the type to just disappear. When Teodora failed to return or contact anyone, Christiana grew frantic. She reported her mother missing to the police and began her own search. Days passed with no word. The last person believed to have seen Teodora alive was Stanimir Radevsky. He had arranged to meet her that evening, making him one of the first people police questioned. In fact, Christiana later learned that Stanimir had been detained by police for 24 hours shortly after Teodora vanished. It was a standard procedure, hold the last known contact for questioning, and he was released without charge due to lack of evidence. There was no body, no crime scene, and Stanimir flatly denied any knowledge of what happened to Teodora. The investigation stalled. Teodora had simply vanished without a trace, and Burgas police had few leads. Christiana refused to give up. For months she plastered missing person flyers, pleaded on social media, and prodded the authorities to keep investigating. It was a lonely, agonizing quest. "I'm sure my mother didn't go into hiding or kill herself. Someone did something to her," Christiana insisted to journalists in the summer of 2021. By then, nearly a year had passed. Teodora's disappearance remained a perplexing mystery in Burgas, but Christiana noticed something chilling. Another person in their circle had now gone missing, and the common link was, once again, Stanimir Radevsky. In early August 2021, news broke that 28-year-old Yuma Mehmed had disappeared under strange circumstances. Yuma was known around town, though not always for the best reasons. Officially, he was a construction worker, a handyman who did odd jobs including plastering and renovations. Unofficially, people knew Yuma had a history on the wrong side of the law. He had grown up an orphan in state care and as a teenager fell in with the gang of a notorious local crime boss, Dimitar Zhelyaskov, nicknamed Mityo Ochite, the Eyes. Police knew Yuma as a small-time tough. He'd been investigated for arson, extortion, and drug dealing in connection with Zhelyaskov's organized crime group. Despite that background, those close to Yuma say he was trying to turn his life around with honest work. He had a girlfriend who loved him, and a mother, Gylfi, who despite his upbringing in orphanages was still part of his life, and, interestingly, for the past few years, Yuma had been working closely with Stanimir Radevsky. Some described Yuma as Stanimir's gopher, or momche zavsichko, a Bulgarian phrase meaning boy for everything, essentially an errand boy. One investigative article later alleged that 55-year-old Stanimir had practically become a father figure to Yuma. Under Stanimir's wing, Yuma would do any task asked of him, whether it was helping at construction sites or perhaps shadier jobs. Stanimir, in turn, was connected to the Burgas underworld at a higher level. Authorities quietly considered him part of the upper echelons of a well-organized criminal structure. To everyone else, Stanimir Radevsky portrayed himself as a respectable real estate developer and businessman. It was this same respectable businessman who was the last known person to see both Teodora and Yuma before they vanished, nearly 10 months apart. On August 4th, 2021, Yuma Mehmed had spent the evening with friends in downtown Burgas. Around 10 p.m., he got a phone call. Friends overheard him briefly. It sounded like he was discussing a meeting. Yuma told them he had to go see the boss about something and left in a hurry. The boss was understood to mean Stanimir. That was the last time any of Yuma's friends saw him alive. When he didn't come home that night or answer any calls the next day, his girlfriend grew worried. Given Yuma's past, some who knew him wondered if he might have run into underworld trouble or even fled town. But Yuma's girlfriend and his mother felt in their gut that something was wrong. He wouldn't just go off the radar. They reported him missing to the police within 24 hours. A missing adult man, especially one with a criminal record, doesn't always set off alarm bells for law enforcement, but in this case, Burgas police responded quickly. Perhaps they remembered the unsolved disappearance of Teodora Bahlova, which was still fresh in their minds. Perhaps Christiana's persistent warnings reached the right ears. She had been telling anyone who would listen that her mother's case and Yuma's case were likely linked. And central to both was Stanimir Radevsky. Investigators brought Stanimir in for questioning soon after Yuma went missing. He admitted that yes, he had met with Yuma on August 4th. In fact, Stanimir claimed Yuma had come by his apartment that night for a quick visit and then left. Stanimir denied any knowledge of where Yuma went afterward. His demeanor was calm and cooperative at first, but detectives were already uncovering evidence that contradicted his nonchalant story. For one, they found surveillance footage from a street camera near Stanimir's apartment building, showing Yuma getting into Stanimir's white Mercedes station wagon late that night. Phone records also raised suspicion. The call that lured Yuma out was made from a prepaid burner phone activated under a fake name. A phone that, as police later discovered, had been used only once to call Yuma. By August 9th, 5 days after Yuma's disappearance, investigators had enough circumstantial evidence to make a bold move. They arrested Stanimir Radevsky on suspicion of kidnapping. Burgas's police chief, Kaloyan Kaloyanov, announced that a special task force had been formed to locate Yuma. At that point, they still hoped to find the young man alive. As the search for Yuma ramped up, Christiana watched anxiously from the sidelines. She had a sinking feeling that the truth behind Yuma's disappearance would also reveal what happened to her mother. In a local TV interview around August 10th, 2021, Christiana said, "I believe this arrest will unravel the mystery of my mum's sudden disappearance and that of Yuma. The common link is that the detained Stanimir was their friend and business partner." She pointed out uncanny similarities. Both of them disappeared in broad daylight. Both of them last communicated with Stanimir. My mother told her close friend that she expected something very important to happen to her. Yuma said something similar in different words. After that, they vanished, she explained. Her appeals cast a spotlight on Stanimir and put pressure on the police to dig deeper. It didn't take long for the gruesome truth to emerge. On August 11th, 2021, investigators searching areas around Burgas made that horrific discovery of Yuma's dismembered body. His remains had been stuffed into multiple small garbage bags and dumped in a rural location near the city's outskirts. Specifically, the parts were found buried near an old warehouse by the Despred logistics base between the villages of Dolno Ezerovo and Bratovo, an area near Lake Vaya on Burgas's edge. One press report noted Yuma had been shot in the head with a single bullet and precisely cut up in the bathroom of some apartment. Indeed, forensic examination suggested the dismemberment had been done skillfully, likely using a power tool such as a reciprocating saw. This indicated planning. The killer had prepared tools and a disposal method in advance. Within hours of finding the remains, the missing person case officially became a murder investigation. Police rearrested Stanimir, who had been briefly let go, or perhaps was out on bail for the kidnapping charge, and now accused him of Yuma's murder. The circumstantial evidence was strengthening. A search of an apartment linked to Stanimir revealed traces of blood that DNA tests would later confirm as Yuma's. Even more damning, investigators recovered an electric saber saw on a landing in the residential building where one of Stanimir's associates lived. It had tissue and DNA from Yuma clinging to the blade. This associate was a man named Dejan Dicho Dichev, a 36-year-old chef and longtime friend of Stanimir. As the director of the Burgas police, Commissioner Kaloyanov, later explained, over the course of several days, the perpetrator returned to the apartment where the crime was committed and dismembered the corpse. The remains were put in numerous small bags, loaded into a car, and left at the place where we found them. The evidence now clearly pointed to a premeditated operation, and it appeared Stanimir had help in executing it. Under intense interrogation, Dejan Dichev broke down and became a key witness for the prosecution. He was officially charged as an accessory, specifically for helping hide Yuma's body and the firearm, but in exchange for some leniency, he agreed to reveal everything he knew, and he knew a lot. The emerging narrative was chilling. According to evidence gathered by prosecutors, the chain of events was as follows. Stanimir Radevsky had lured Yuma Mehmed to an apartment on the night of August 4th, 2021 under some pretext, perhaps a business discussion or to hand over money. This wasn't Stanimir's own home, but an unused apartment to which he had access. In fact, one report later revealed it belonged to a prominent Sofia lawyer who was an acquaintance of Stanimir. The owner was not involved in the crime, but had allowed Stanimir to use the vacant flat. In that apartment, Stanimir shot Yuma in the head with a Makarov pistol equipped with a silencer. The killing was quick and clinical. Immediately afterward, Stanimir summoned Dichev, the professional chef, and it turned out, amateur butcher, to assist with the grimmest task imaginable. Over the next few days, behind the closed doors of that apartment, the two men methodically dismembered Yuma's body in the bathtub. We can only imagine the scene from the forensic evidence later presented. Plastic sheeting to contain the mess, the whine of an electric saw echoing in the tiled bathroom, the smell of bleach and blood mingling. At one point, Dichev later admitted, they even stopped to cook a meal in the apartment's kitchen, the chef's grim attempt to maintain composure, before returning to the gruesome work. Body parts were bagged and eventually transported by car in the dead of night to the remote dumping ground outside the city. The murder weapon, the Makarov handgun, was handed off to an associate to hide in an unlikely place, the attic of the Burgas military club building, perhaps chosen to ward off suspicion. Every effort was made to cover their tracks, but in their haste or inexperience with forensic science, the conspirators missed a few crucial bits of evidence. The blood spatters in the apartment, the cellular records of that single-use phone, and the saw, which Dichev stashed at his residence, maybe thinking police would never search the home of a respected restaurateur. These pieces would all come back to haunt them. With Yuma's case rapidly unfolding, authorities circled back to the still missing Teodora Bahlova. The big question loomed: was there a connection? The Burgas prosecutor overseeing the case, Desislava Trifonova, initially played it coy. When pressed by reporters on August 12, 2021, about links between Yuma's murder and Teodora's disappearance, she said, "At this point, there is no evidence in the pre-trial proceedings of a connection between the two. It's likely this was a strategic answer. Prosecutors sometimes downplay theories until they have solid proof. Privately, they had to be considering the glaring similarities. And Christiana's public campaign had effectively tied the two cases together in the court of public opinion. Indeed, behind the scenes, Dejan Dichev was providing bombshell information. He told investigators that Stanimir Radevsky had also murdered Teodora Bahlova, and that he, Dichev, knew where Teodora's remains were hidden. On August 25, 2021, nearly 10 months after Teodora went missing, a police caravan quietly made its way to the northern edge of Burgas's main cemetery, not far from the Izgrev residential quarter. There, guided by Dichev's directions, officers began to dig in a weedy, overgrown corner of parcel number 12, a part of the cemetery grounds that was rarely visited. What they unearthed was another nightmare: 2 large plastic barrels partially buried in the dirt. Inside one barrel were human remains, a woman's torso. In another were 2 human arms. The remains were in an advanced state of decomposition. Investigators described the find as an appalling discovery, yet it was also a breakthrough. DNA testing confirmed what everyone feared. It was Teodora. The manner of Teodora's death, as reconstructed by the forensic evidence and Dichev's testimony, was shockingly similar to Yuma's. According to the subsequent indictment, Stanimir shot Teodora in the chest with a firearm, possibly the same Makarov pistol with its serial numbers filed off. The murder happened in an uninhabited apartment that Stanimir had access to, not one he owned, but an empty flat he could use, similar to the tactic he later used with Yuma. Stanimir somehow acquired large plastic barrels and a significant quantity of a corrosive acid, strong enough to eat away at flesh. For 3 months, those barrels sat hidden in a closed, unused storefront, specifically an out-of-service vegetable shop in Burgas that Stanimir had access to. All the while, Teodora's family was frantically searching for her across the city. By early 2021, after roughly 3 months, the acid had done its work to a degree. The body was badly decomposed, but not entirely destroyed. At that point, Stanimir, perhaps with an accomplice's help, decided to move the remains. Under cover of darkness, the barrels were retrieved from the vegetable shop and transported to the city cemetery, and buried them in that remote, unfrequented section. The spot was carefully chosen to avoid drawing attention. A patch of overgrowth near some pine trees and ivy, as one journalist noted, which actually helped preserve what remained of the body due to shade and vegetation. The revelations came as a gut punch to Teodora's family. Christiana, upon hearing that her mother's body had been found, was overcome with grief and anger. Stoyanka, Teodora's mother, wept that they had destroyed my child for the sake of 3 apartments in Lozanets. This wasn't just baseless speculation by a grieving parent. There was evidence of a concrete motive. It turned out Teodora and Stanimir's business dealings were complicated and had recently soured. Teodora had financed a real estate project with Stanimir and another partner named Angel, lending them a large sum of money. In return, Stanimir had agreed to give Teodora 3 apartments in a new luxury resort complex they were building in Lozanets, a beach town south of Burgas. This agreement, astonishingly, wasn't fully formalized on paper. They had a sort of gentleman's agreement, perhaps sealed with some preliminary contracts, perhaps not. By mid-2020, the resort complex was well underway, upscale guest villas, a potentially very profitable development. Teodora was pressuring Stanimir to fulfill his promise and hand over the 3 apartments, or pay back the large loan she had given him. She persistently sought money, or movable and immovable property from Stanimir Radevsky, according to prosecutors' findings. In other words, she wanted her investment returned. Stanimir, deep in various schemes and perhaps short on cash, apparently saw Teodora's demands as a threat to his enterprise. Rather than pay his debt, he chose the unfathomable path of murdering his friend and benefactor to wipe the slate clean. By killing her and hiding her body, he likely hoped to avoid repaying the loan and to quietly reallocate her promised apartments elsewhere. It was greed, pure and simple. Greed mixed with arrogance enough to think he could get away with it. The motive for Yuma's murder was slightly different, but rooted in the same cesspool of corruption. After Teodora disappeared, Yuma Mehmed knew or eventually learned what had happened. Imagine the situation. Yuma was Stanimir's go-to guy, loyal and rough-edged. It's quite possible Yuma helped Stanimir at some stage in handling Teodora's body, or at least discovered the truth, whether by walking in on something he shouldn't have, or through suspicious circumstances. Yuma then saw an opportunity. He began extorting Stanimir, demanding money in exchange for his silence about Teodora. Prosecutors later confirmed this narrative. The construction worker Yuma Mehmed was killed in identical fashion. He was shot because he knew about the broker's death and was blackmailing Radevsky to keep quiet. Yuma likely felt that Stanimir owed him, not just for unpaid work he'd done, perhaps disposing of Teodora's remains, but now for essentially hush money. Indeed, initial reports to the court cited unfulfilled promises to pay money for work done as the motive for killing Yuma. When threats and pleas from Yuma grew inconvenient, Stanimir added him to the list of problems to be eliminated, and Stanimir likely would have continued on with life as if nothing happened, had the police not pieced it all together in time. As Burgas's appellate prosecutor, Jovita Grigorova, starkly put it, "These are heinous intentional crimes, and we have a serial killer, Stanimir Radevsky." By autumn 2021, the case against Stanimir was overwhelming. Authorities held a press briefing on October 8, 2021, to reveal the mountain of evidence gathered for the double murder charges. They had recovered the Makarov pistol used in at least Yuma's killing, and possibly Teodora's, pending ballistics. The pistol had been found hidden at the Burgas military club and had its serial numbers obliterated. A ballistic expert later matched a bullet retrieved from Teodora's remains. Incredibly, a spent projectile was found in the sewer near the vegetable shop, where her body had been dissolved, to that same weapon. Investigators had combed the city sewer system with special cameras and even extracted a fragment of bone and a tooth of Teodora's from the drain near the body storage site. They found personal items belonging to the victims. They traced the burner phone to a purchase made by a proxy of Stanimir. All told, the prosecutor Georgi Chinev declared they had new evidence for the two severe murders in Burgas. Both bodies were found dismembered, and the construction entrepreneur Stanimir Radevsky is charged with the murders. Perhaps most damning of all was the witness testimony. Dejan Dichev, once a jovial chef known for running a popular local restaurant, would now testify how he saw his boss and friend Stanimir commit these horrific acts and how he himself participated in covering them up. For hiding the gun and the remains, Dichev was charged under Article 294 of the Bulgarian Penal Code, essentially for aiding the criminal after the fact. Interestingly, Bulgarian law had no specific provision for desecration or dismemberment of a corpse. Thus, Dichev could not be charged for the act of cutting up bodies in itself, only for concealing the crime. Dichev's cooperation was invaluable, albeit controversial. Some in Burgas angrily labelled him a cleaner, or chistash, the man who cleaned up the murders, and felt he too deserved heavy punishment. In any event, with Dichev's insider knowledge and the trove of forensic evidence, the prosecutors had a solid case that Stanimir Radevsky orchestrated both killings. The legal process ground forward, albeit slower than the victims' families would have liked. Stanimir was indicted on 2 counts of premeditated murder, and in late 2021, the Burgas District Court ordered him detained pending trial, deeming him far too dangerous to release. The trial proper began in 2022. It was a trial that riveted local media, often described as the trial of a serial killer in a city not accustomed to such horrors. There were dramatic scenes outside the courthouse. Angry friends of Yuma, burly men from the criminal underworld, attempted to attack Stanimir as he was escorted in a prison van. On one occasion, a group of Yuma's buddies kicked and thumped the sides of the van, shouting for vengeance. Police had to form a cordon to prevent a lynching attempt, Burgas was on edge. Many ordinary citizens felt a mix of shock and grim satisfaction that the killer had been caught. The case exposed an ugly nexus of crime and real estate, shattering any illusions about respectable businessmen in their community. The courtroom itself saw high drama of a different sort. Stanimir Radevsky, once a confident wheeler dealer, sat impassively throughout most of the proceedings. He maintained an eerie silence, never confessing, never outwardly reacting. Multiple witnesses testified. Forensic experts detailed the dismemberment and disposal. Police officers recounted the months of dogged investigation. And finally, Dejan Dichev took the stand to give a first-hand account of the gruesome acts. It was likely the most disturbing testimony the Burgas court had heard in years. At one point, prosecutors played portions of Dichev's earlier statements, how Stanimir had casually told him, "One carcass was annoying me, so I killed him," referring to Yuma. In another chilling detail reported by flagman.bg, Stanimir had apparently bragged to Dichev about the Teodora murder, indicating where he poured out Bahlova's dissolved flesh, information he gave police during interrogations, only to later claim amnesia in court. Such details turned the stomachs of everyone present. Through it all, Stanimir's defense team attempted various strategies. They pointed out that there was no direct eyewitness to the moment of the murders besides an accomplice trying to save his own skin. They argued that the murder weapon's chain of custody was circumstantial, that no one had actually seen Stanimir pull the trigger. Notably, the defense emphasized that the authorities never recovered any of Teodora's remains that showed a bullet wound because only her torso and arms were found, not the head or lower limbs. They even tried to cast doubt by saying, "No weapon, no proof he chopped Yuma. He's accused only based on Dichev's claims," as some of Stanimir's lawyers told the press. But this was bluster. In truth, there was a weapon, the Makarov, and there was plenty of physical evidence. The forensic links, DNA, ballistic matches, phone records, formed a tight web. It was hard for the defense to deny. The supervising prosecutor, Desislava Trifonova, was adamant that the evidence categorically refutes Stanimir's denials. She painted a portrait of the accused as a very bad and dangerous person, someone of such social menace that society must be protected from him permanently. Another prosecutor described the case as having no analogue in recent years in Bulgaria, because it's exceedingly rare for one person to murder two close acquaintances in the same brutal way and then handle their bodies with such a complete lack of humanity. As the trial neared its end in early 2024, there was little doubt about the outcome. Still, Stanimir continued to play games to delay the inevitable. In January 2024, during what was supposed to be the final hearing for closing arguments, his attorney suddenly claimed to be too ill to attend, sending in a medical note for an unspecified upper respiratory infection. Prosecutor Trifonova openly questioned the excuse's legitimacy, noting that the defense lawyer had been spotted actively working on another case the day before. But out of an abundance of caution, the judge postponed the proceedings briefly. The following month, the trial resumed. The courtroom was packed with the victims' family members, journalists, and even some of Yuma's tough-looking friends, under watch to prevent any outburst. In late February 2024, both sides made their closing speeches. The prosecutor delivered a forceful summary, and the lawyer for the victims' families, Dimitar Valchev, pleaded with emotion for the maximum penalty. "We will argue for the maximum sentence, life imprisonment without parole," he said, emphasizing that nothing less could deliver justice. The families themselves, by Bulgarian law, were civil parties to the case. They had filed claims for financial damages, a total of 1.2 million Bulgarian lev, around $700,000, between Teodora's and Yuma's relatives. It was blood money that could never truly compensate for the loss, but was their right to seek. Ultimately, the court would award a smaller amount, about 400,000 lev to Teodora's family and 40,000 lev to Yuma's, recognizing the greater material support Teodora had provided to her dependents. On March 1st, 2024, the Burgas District Court delivered its verdict. Stanimir Radevsky was found guilty on all counts, the murders of Teodora Bahlova and Umer Mehmed, and was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. It is the harshest sentence under Bulgarian law, reserved for the worst crimes, and it meant the 58-year-old convict would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. As the judge read out the decision, Stanimir stood motionless, betraying no emotion. Even at that final moment, he refused to acknowledge responsibility. As his long silence continued, he made only a parting comment while being led out. He muttered that he had nothing to do with the crimes he was accused of, a claim the evidence had firmly refuted, as lawyer Valchev pointed out to reporters. Outside the courthouse, the families of the victims met the verdict with somber satisfaction. They would never get their loved ones back, but at least the man responsible could hurt no one else. Teodora's daughter Hristiana could not be in the courtroom that day. She was in the hospital recovering from a medical issue, but she gave a statement from her hospital bed. "No sentence will bring my mother back, nor lessen my pain," she said. "But I am immensely happy that our justice system gave an adequate sentence to... I cannot call him a person," she said, her voice trembling with relief and grief. Yuma's mother, Gulfi, and his girlfriend Gabriella were quieter in their response. Perhaps because, painfully, they had already lost Yuma in a different way long ago, when he fell into a life of crime. But they too expressed gratitude that justice was done. In the aftermath, some intriguing side notes emerged. It turned out that during the trial, Stanimir had exhausted his resources on legal fees and had many of his assets frozen. A local newspaper quipped that he was now poor as a church mouse compared to his formerly flashy lifestyle. Teodora's mother, Stoyanka, made a public demand that Stanimir's wife, Elena, vacate a certain Burgas apartment that rightfully belonged to Teodora's estate. The backstory there was that Stanimir had apparently transferred or encumbered some of Teodora's properties during the time she was missing, trying to capitalize on her absence. Stoyanka wanted those ill-gotten gains returned. She also hinted darkly that many more unsavory truths about Stanimir's dealings would surface, suggesting that the web of corruption might involve others in positions of power. Indeed, there were rumors that other mysterious deaths might be connected to Stanimir. At least one investigative piece questioned whether the deaths of two elderly people in a valuable property could be tied to his so-called property mafia schemes. And one man, described as a brutally abused slave of Stanimir, came forward claiming he had been victimized in other ways. These additional allegations remain largely beyond the scope of the double murder case, but they paint a picture of a predatory operator who had been hiding in plain sight in Burgas' society for years. For the Burgas Police and Prosecutor's Office, the case was a point of pride. The Interior Minister himself commended the investigative team for unravelling the murder scheme of Radevsky, and honoured the officers for their excellent work. The investigators had indeed shown tenacity and even creativity, employing psychologists from the Interior Ministry's Institute of Psychology to help break the suspects, and using high-tech video scoping in sewers for evidence. I think this case, in its specifics, has no analogue not only in Burgas, but in the country in recent years, Prosecutor Trifonova remarked, underscoring its chilling uniqueness. As he was led away to begin his life sentence, Stanimir Radevsky remained stone-faced. He gave no apology, no explanation. But those who witnessed the trial could see the truth plainly. Stanimir Radevsky, the cunning businessman who turned out to be a cold-blooded killer, will spend the rest of his days behind bars, never able to betray another friend or spill another drop of innocent blood. And for Burgas, that is justice well served. Thank you again for listening. Sharing these lesser-known cases is important to us, and if you'd like to support the podcast, following along or giving us a 5-star rating would mean so much. We'll be back next week with another case. See you then.